There'll be love and laughter forever after, my darling.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Ryn from Fanzine DRIVE-IN ASYLUM, and before we get into the commentary track, we're going to look at the varying ad campaigns for the folks at Red Wolf Inn, which is exciting because this movie was marketed using so many different titles. The Folks at Red Wolf Inn was the original title, Never Trust IMDb, and it had this American Gothic style ad featuring Arthur Space and Mary Jackson looking like the most sinister grandparents ever. These first theatrical dates were in September 1972, and this early ad campaign also used some great quotes that were supposedly harvested from comment cards of patrons who saw this movie at a preview. You should pause the video on some of these and read them because they're absolutely outrageous. I don't know who could have said no to the Folks at Red Wolf Inn after reading some of this stuff. It continued to roll out all over the US in 1973 with co-features like Alfred Hitchcock's Frenzy, Scars of Dracula, and this one, The Forgotten, which is S.F. Brownrigg's grindhouse masterpiece Don't Look in the Basement under its original title. Now, in mid-1973, it got a revamped ad campaign, this time featuring Linda Gillen's head on a cast iron skillet. It also replaced the tagline with a grotty bedtime story, although the British slang term may have been lost on most of America. I really want one of those skillets with the wolf on the handle. Now, it played that way all throughout 1974, and then it reappeared in 1975 in a few cities as Terror at Red Wolf Inn, reverting to the sinister grandparents design, before finally changing gears completely by changing the title to Terror House, with a wonderfully weird poster depicting a cartoonish Red Wolf Inn guarded by Archie the dog. Now, this was 1976, and it was mainly created, I think, to be a co-feature to other movies, like here it's with Haunts, a wonderful film in and of itself. Now, it played throughout the rest of the 70s as Terror House, like here in Pittsburgh it is with Suspiria, I can't believe it, and other movies like Killer Snakes, a wonderful movie, right? The Hearse from 1980 and The Incredible Melting Man, Faint. 1981, Demonoid, Double Faint, and also from 81 with Escape from New York and Chicago, and maybe that's when Roger Ebert saw it and chose it as a Dog of the Week for sneak previews. Now, here's something strange. Also in 1981, it was being marketed as Secrets Beyond the Door. Yes, there is yet another theatrical title for Folks at Red Wolf Inn, and here it is, a slasher-ish ad campaign from the early 1980s, which is really weird because in 1981, that was when it made its syndicated TV debut. But it was still playing under this title as late as 1984. Here it is with The Beyond under the alternate title Seven Doors of Death. Now, home video was another market where this movie got a couple of new titles, just what it needed, right? Club Dead. This was a U.S. release, and there was also a U.S. release as Terror at Red Wolf Inn on Academy Home Video. Terror on the Menu was the name in the UK, and also in Canada. There may have been a U.S. release as Terror on the Menu as well, but when a movie has this many titles, you tend to lose track. Here's Sam Panico with a cocktail.
Hey, welcome. We're getting ready to make a drink for the folks at Red Wolf Inn, aka Terror House, aka sure we'll tell you a million titles during this video. Now, if you watch our show, you already know this. We do a show every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, sometimes 11. There's usually a drink that goes with each movie. If you're a newcomer coming to watch this video, welcome. And we're going to show you a drink that goes perfectly with this movie that you can enjoy while you're enjoying our commentary track. Hopefully you like it. Here's the ingredients. Let's go through them first. We got some vodka. Any brand will do. Coconut rum. Only Malibu. Just kidding. You can use any brand. Peach schnapps. Pineapple juice. Grenadine. Half and half. How do they go together? Quite simply.
Magic.
You're going to put everything in a shaker with ice. You're going to do a half an ounce of vodka, a half an ounce of Malibu, a half an ounce of peach schnapps, an ounce and a half
Of pineapple juice.
Pineapple juice. You're going to do a dash of grenadine. And by a dash, I mean don't go crazy. Just do a little, watch me go crazy. But just a dollop. Just a little tiny. Boop. There you go. That's all you need. You're going to make that sound effect when you do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, this is going to make this drink interesting. Half and half. We're going to do
Half ounce.
Half an ounce, yeah. Heavy cream or half and half. I prefer half and half. It just blends better. And this is called a Regina on the Beach, obviously named for our main character in this movie, Regina, and the big scene when she finds out that her lover, potential lover, might be insane because he gets a shark. Spoiler warning. And gets the shark and just starts shaking it and starts beating it against the rocks. Right, Cubby? That's Cubby. If you never met Cubby, he helps us make the drinks and do the show. Anyway, then you kind of beat the vacuum seal there, and you pour it in a fancy glass, and now you can be sophisticated while you're watching the folks.
It even looks, it's the color of sand.
Yeah, it is. So you can just watch this, pretend you're out on the beach watching these two crazy kids fall in love, and you're like, Pazuzu. I wonder what's going on with those kids. Why is he beating that shark against the rocks? Why are they cannibals? Who are these older people? What's the whole story? How have they done this for so many years? We'll learn that. We'll get into the whole story. Enjoy this drink. Enjoy the movie. Thanks for watching this video.
Hey, this is Sam from BNS About Movies.
This is Bill Van Ryn from Fanzine Drive-In Asylum.
And we are watching The Folks at Red Wolf Inn, a movie that you've already learned has tons of titles. And a movie that we both love. I know it's one of Bill's top movies. And we have a lot to say about it. So thanks for clicking on this video and getting into it with us.
The version that we're watching here this is the uncut print of the movie, or at least the most complete as we know it. There was an edited version that had a few scenes removed to get a PG rating. That's the version that's known as Terror House. And that's the version that was released on Academy Video and ended up on all those budget DVD compilations, the PG cut.
It's missing with the one scene of a body part and a few other things.
But this is the original R-rated cut of the film.
This is obviously Linda Gillen here as our lead character. I was trying to think of how I could say this and not come off like a guy, but she really looks like 19, 20-year-old Sam would have made her mixtapes. And been like, and she would be like, oh, thanks, I don't really like Papa Weed itself. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, what do you like? But I would like make her a really good mixtape.
I'd make a mixtape for Linda Gillen too.
Yeah.
She has a natural light about her.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that she got into acting. I think this is one of the movies that really shows you what she can do.
She's had a lot of like real life adventures that inform her acting. When she was on the show that we do, it was funny how much where she would just kind of, she doesn't name drop, but she would like start telling you the story and you'd be amazed like of the people that she was talking about and how she was, and like it was just like no big deal. I like the, obviously I know this is early 70s, but like dudes just didn't wear shirts in the early 70s. They would just hang out in public just shirtless getting their mail.
I saw this film when I was 14 and I never forgot Linda Gillen, and I didn't realize that I'd been seeing her in movies and commercials all along, but each of her roles, she looks a little bit different. She's kind of tough to recognize sometimes.
I love this apartment building. I like the idea of it, especially later when we get into the more countrified location of the rest of the movie, how tight everybody is on top of each other here. It's such a juxtaposition before what happens later.
We didn't talk about that song that we heard at the beginning of the movie, sung by Marilyn Lovell, My Dream, about rays of light being woven into a dress. It's like Regina's soul got a hold of some really good weed. Well, Bud Townsend instead wanted to use Brand New Key by Melanie.
Oh, wow.
Which I think would have been a lot more exciting.
Where are you on the debate about that song being dirty?
I'm sure Tipper Gore thinks it's dirty. I don't know. I don't think you're supposed to think that much about it. I love Melanie and I love Brand New Key, and I would have loved to hear that in this movie.
Yeah.
She's watching some soap opera on TV, and the voices that you actually hear are Linda and Michael MacReady.
Oh, wow.
I can relate to this, too, because there were a couple times in college where I stayed in the dorm over a holiday, and it's really extremely strange and lonely. And she keeps peanut butter in her drawer. I think those posters of the Beatles came with the White Album.
Oh, really? Gosh, it's so silly. Like when you watch this movie now, nearly 50 years after it was made, and you're like, oh, look at that beautiful rotary phone. Nobody thought that when they saw it back then.
I still have a rotary phone. It is in the other room,
Oh,
Sam
man.
Panico.
She's just incredibly likable. Like you just get she's a great kind of protagonist for this movie.
She's got a great vulnerability too, because she's a very happy, sweet person.
Yeah.
But you also feel like she's got this naivete, maybe because of her age, and she doesn't realize what kind of danger she's in, which is important for a film like this. She dyed her hair for this, and there was some point where they had to go back and film some more stuff, and she had to dye her hair again, and Bud was very concerned that it didn't match. I can kind of tell, but, we'll never know until we get the definitive HD transfer of Terror House. Let's talk a little bit about this ruse that they use to lure people to the mansion.
Mm-hmm.
She gets this letter in the mail saying she won a contest that she didn't even remember entering. That means somebody targeted her, right?
Yeah.
Because they had to have known that she was the kind of person that would have nowhere to go. So that suggests that there's this network, there's somebody on the campus that's scoping out prospective victims. And that would make sense, because then there's other people to take part in this meat that they're collecting at the Red Wolf Inn, because they have that big freezer. It's like they're harvesting human meat and farming it out to this cult of cannibals, and it's all part of a huge human trafficking network.
I thought about this the other night when I watched House of the Devil again. I think you like House of the Devil because it has so much in common with this. It's like a college student that answers an ad that really doesn't make sense, or talks to people on the phone where it doesn't make sense. And also that movie starts with that stat about the underground network of Satanists that most people didn't believe in.
Yeah,
there's like thematic ties between the two.
Wow, I never thought about that. I'm very predictable.
Well, you like young girls in trouble. And not for a prurient reason. You just like young girls that get into like bad situations and make the most of them.
I identify with them.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm into old ladies that eat people.
Yeah. I enjoy that, like, she has agreed to go to a place where she doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't even know where it is.
It was a little more believable in the 70s, I guess, because at that time there wasn't technology where you could find out everything about any subject. And, she couldn't just Google it on her smartphone. He's like, we got her. And we're to believe that is the pilot that called Mary Jackson on the phone. Mary Jackson, by the way. She was on the Waltons.
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny is, like, in the, her husband in this movie came from Lassie. So it's like you have, like, two people.
Arthur Space.
Yeah, and you have two people that are, at the time, would be in the minds of the audience for this movie as, like, trustable people. They had traditionally done these roles where they were, like, kindly older people that helped you. And then all of a sudden they're in this movie as anything but.
This is post-Manson, and at the time, the youth culture was seen as the potential enemy, that there were crazy people in the youth culture and these hippies. But in this movie, it's the older generation that's doing it. They're the corruptors. And of course, this is the Vietnam era as well. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. They don't directly address it, but it informs a lot of the attitudes in this film. It's what the movie doesn't say that intrigues me, because admittedly it has a very short runtime and there isn't much backstory going on here, but those are my favorite kinds of films because the first time you see them they don't make sense.
Yeah.
See, look how he's in disguise here. He has like those big glasses on. Like, he doesn't want people to know what he looks like in case she would get away or something. They wouldn't be able to identify him.
Yeah, that's Paul the pilot. And that's Earl Parker, who a lot of his career is in stunts. He was Vic Morrow's stunt double on Combat and in a few other movies. So now that I know that, I look at him like, yeah, he kind of has a little bit of Vic Morrow ism to him. Back to Mary Jackson. She's also in The Exorcist 3. She's Sister Felice in Airport. Mrs. Dillon, Big Top Pee-wee. She was in Audrey Rose. She's Jane's mom in Fun with Dick and Jane. and she's a crawdaddy in the movie Skinned Alive. And her first acting role was on a show called Racket Squad, where she was in a fake seance. She was a member of a seance in that.
This kind of role was not unusual for her then.
Yeah. It's Baby John, played by John Nelson, who Baby John is quite important to this later.
John Nielsen was in The Graduate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, uncredited, I believe. He and Richard Dreyfuss in a party scene.
He's also in Honky and Shark's Treasure. I knew him from Shark's Treasure.
Linda said she really liked him. He raised dogs somewhere in California. And she said that they lost touch over the years, and then she was sad to discover that he had died really young.
Have you ever won a contest where they just fly you out of a municipal airport?
Never.
Never.
I never won a contest where they flew me anywhere, but I would be suspicious.
Yeah, she's, I guess, not suspicious at all. These things just happen. Were people maybe just a little more innocent in the 70s where they didn't read into these things when they happened?
Well, for one thing, that is an interesting point that you bring up. There wasn't this kind of pervasive information in the 70s. Obviously, if it happened locally, you would know a lot of things, but these stories weren't national. So, in a sense, it wasn't easy to get a real idea of how many times young people were disappearing and how many people were ending up murdered somewhere. So,
and like the serial killer, they weren't as popularized nationwide until, much later.
So it is feasible that somebody could get away with something like this.
Yeah. There's no cell phones to track data. I always think about that. Back then there's no DNA for crime. So they just find blood on the floor and well, there's some blood. Can't really test it. This is Michael MacReady as the cop, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Who, kind of what you said, he took the money from the Count Yorga films that he produced, and this was kind of followed the Yorga films.
Yeah, which may or may not have been a wise investment.
His dad's the narrator of Count Yorga, George MacReady, and he was also Professor Reichstadt in Return of Count Yorga. So yeah, he's the son of an actor. There's a lot of family connections within some of the other folks in this movie. This is kind of like the action scene thrown in to make sure the audience is awake, huh?
I accidentally drove through someone's backyard just like this once. It was in this little rural town in the mountains in Pennsylvania, and we would drive around at night and try and find interesting roads because there's nothing else to do. And we drove through a trailer park. We didn't understand that it was a horseshoe-shaped layout, but the back part of the horseshoe was someone's backyard.
Oh,
and
wow.
We drove back there, and all this laundry was hanging up, and they were sitting around a fire pit drinking. And they just waved at us as we drove by. They didn't even seem pissed that somebody was driving through their backyard. Baby John and Regina were lucky that there was not a fire pit with people sitting around it to see what they just did.
Well, this is pre-GPS too, so if you're doing these kind of antics, you're just kind of lost. I had a similar story like that happen where I was dating a girl who was a couple years younger than me, so her parents were always, 2 or 3 years younger than me, so her parents were always kind of worried about her. I don't know, maybe I was from the wrong side of the tracks. And one night, we were coming home, took a wrong road, and ended up in Ohio. It's my hometown's right on the state line. And we were so far away from home, we had to find a payphone, pre-cell phone. This is mid-90s, and call her parents. And they're like, oh, likely story, you're in Mahoning County. I'm like, no, I really have no sense of direction.
Was there a honey bear there?
Oh, I wish there was no Honey Bear convenience store there.
There we have the Piru Mansion. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. Piru? Piru?
I'm the wrong person to ask on pronunciations.
I know.
It's a great setting for this movie, though. I love houses like this and The House and the Prowler.
There's so many other movies that this appears in.
Oh, really?
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. It's the house in Curse of the Black Widow.
Oh, wow.
It was on an episode of Heart to Heart, the one about the murder mystery party, the Halloween party that they go to.
Oh, yeah.
Also, Tarantulas, The Deadly Cargo, Pets, and Die Sister Die. A lot of TV, too. The Incredible Hulk, Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island. A number of times it was on Fantasy Island. It's such a distinctive looking place. I was really jealous of Sally in Don't Be Afraid of the Dark that she inherited a place like that. Well, minus the monsters. I wasn't jealous of that. I should also mention that this is, of course, still the Piru Mansion. They're showing the inside. But not everything inside the Red Wolf Inn was filmed at Piru. Some of it was filmed at Maury Mansion in Redlands, California, mainly the upstairs portions of the inn. So it wasn't really the Piru Mansion the entire time.
This has kind of... it's funny, early 70s TV movies and exploitation movies can be kind of confused sometimes. They have the same level as of filming and quality sometimes. And cast. They share the same cast. Did you ever have a phone like that?
Never.
Never. My grandmother had one. Up until the mid 70s, she still had one of those.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hardcore.
Yeah.
Margaret Avery.
Yeah, perhaps the best known actress in this.
In case you don't recognize her, that's Shug Avery from The Color Purple. Also, there's Janet Wood, the star of Fangs.
Yeah, and Angels Hard as They Come and Ice Cream Man. And she's in Up, the Russ Meyer movie, and did stunts for that movie. Margaret Avery's in the Sentry episode of The Night Stalker. And she's and she's in the Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. And before or after this movie, right around the same time, she did Something Evil, the Spielberg TV movie. And then An Eye for an Eye, the movie that the aborted Maniac 2 was going to be kind of based on.
Mm-hmm.
She's in that movie as well. This scene's great. This is why I love this movie, because it's very much a furniture-y kind of movie. And this room feels absolutely ridiculous. I remember when I had chairs like that in my old house. I had those wooden chairs that had those kind of...
How could you... I don't remember that.
Yeah.
How could you have a meal in a room like this? This is so... It's like a museum.
Yeah. I've never... Well... my wife's best friends, Amy, who you've met, she lives in Eisenhower's secretary's house in Gettysburg, which is on the list of historical houses. And they have a room like this in the house, and that's where they eat their Thanksgiving. They have a room just for holiday dinners. That's how big this house is. And I always think, how can you eat in this room? It feels like like you said, you're eating in a museum or a library. It's not intimate. It
doesn't stimulate the appetite.
It's very much like The Jerk whenever he's sitting so far away from her when they're kind of on the outs.
I should also mention that this is a sound stage. The kitchen, they didn't use the actual kitchen here.
I've never been served, what are those, capers on the end or whatever they're called? It's very much, it looks like something from a Looney Tunes cartoon.
This is the scene that really upset me the first time I saw this movie, and I didn't see it coming. Because when they brought that rack of ribs out, immediately your mind goes right to a human rib cage. And I don't know why, because those obviously are not human ribs. So.
No.
But I don't know how he managed to evoke that. It's really brilliant.
I think you never see, usually when you're served ribs, they're not carved out like that, where there's something left behind like that. And that scene just makes it feel like it's so much more a body part, a torso, than, we usually see ribs that are already prepared. Do you think they're mad that she's not eating the meat and just eating corn?
Actually, that was one of the agreements that Linda had with Bud Townsend when she accepted this movie. She said, I'm not going to appear naked and I'm not going to eat any meat. Which, you know, you better get that out of the way if you're going to sign on to a movie that involves cannibalism. So Michael MacReady's wife, Pamela, was the caterer for the film, and she made a bunch of vegetarian meals for Linda to eat.
When I first met my father-in-law, we went to the Bellagio casino to a big buffet, and he gave me the rules of the buffet before. It's like, don't eat any vegetables, don't eat any bread. This is all about meat. And I was like, and I felt like, am I in Terror House?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of meat was it?
Yeah, exactly.
For real.
This is very, I get like a very fairy tale vibe from this movie, like, you know, like, or like an EC comic vibe too, like where there's always those stories where they're fattening up, you know, a kid, they've adopted a kid and they're fattening him up because the parents are vampires.
His cheeks stuffed with all that food is so gross. Who does that?
Oh.
And he's breathing through his mouth, through the food.
I know him best from Mansion of the Doomed. He's in that, and he was on The Shakiest Gun in the West. He's in that. And the Bat People, of course. How can we forget the Bat People? And Bigfoot and Wild Boy. He really hit all my cultural peccadillos in the 70s.
He played a lot of winos in the later part of his career. He reminds me of Mark Lawrence.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Not physically, like the way he looks, but like the kinds of roles that they played. And it's not over yet, this scene. It's still going, and now we get Pomp and Circumstance.
I don't understand. Have you ever asked Linda about, like, why this song? 'Cause I always think of this song as either Graduations or Randy Savage's entrance music.
No, she didn't have anything to say about this, but she did tell me when she posted this movie to her YouTube channel, they shut her down because of Pomp and Circumstance.
Who owns the rights to Pomp and Circumstance?
She said it was credited to some strange source, like a band from the 70s or something.
Oh, man. I mean, people did own the rights to Happy Birthday for a while, and you couldn't use Happy Birthday in movies, so I guess maybe you can't use Pomp and Circumstance.
Wasn't it that guy in the Beatles?
Oh, yeah. The guy who, the Alan Klein.
No, that McCartney guy in the Beatles. He owned the rights to Happy Birthday. It was sort of like a story. I'm not sure.
I was thinking because Alan Klein keeping Jodorowsky's movies out of the public domain out of, letting anyone see them. That scene there where just the food is just kind of left behind in the background is very upsetting. This reminds me of the worst job that I have of my many, my household jobs. Is our dog gets one rotisserie chicken a week and I have to like shred it for him. And it's like the worst, like that after effect, like it will make you vegetarian. Like this movie is a good argument for being a vegetarian a bit.
Absolutely.
Is Linda vegetarian?
Yes, mostly.
Yeah.
She doesn't, if she had it her way, she wouldn't have any meat. But I think she does eat a little bit of meat for her health.
Yeah.
When we went to the Mahoning drive-in together, her husband Richard made us these great roast beef sandwiches to take on the road, and then I thought about it later and was highly suspicious.
I do get the feeling that they're a couple, though. The older couple, like for some reason, like, and I know they're great actors because they've been in a lot of stuff, but I really get like a feeling that Henry and Evelyn have been through some stuff.
Yeah, and there's really not enough exposition to warrant that. It's just like the way that these two characters are presented, I think, binds them because they're both ciphers. Mm-hmm. You really don't know. I mean, they do have a little bit of backstory here.
I'm gonna make an X and Pearl with them in it.
That's the movie I would rather see other than X and Pearl.
Yeah, where we go back and we find out Henry and Evelyn, it'll be called. How did they meet? They're on a date and they both accidentally bite the waiter. And they realize that they both are cannibals.
I do have a spec script for Terror House too.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I think there's a great story to be continued here.
I'd like to drink a toast to Pamela. It's been wonderful having such a pretty, warm, soft...
Bye-bye, Pamela. Margaret Avery's character is such a hippie. Look at those beads in her hair.
He is a very 70s Tiger Beat vibe to him. The feathery hair. My babysitter had a room full of Tiger Beat posters, you know, like the Bay City Rollers, and like she would fight other girls in the neighborhood about the Bay City Roller, who was hotter, the Cassidys or the Bay City Rollers. He has very much that look.
I used to buy that magazine for Sean Cassidy.
Uh,
I was a Sean Cassidy fan. And it wasn't like I had a crush on him or anything. I think I liked him from the Hardy Boys, and I couldn't stop buying magazines where he was on the cover.
he was everywhere then, though. He was a really big deal. I think I was probably like that with Kiss. I'd buy bananas and dynamite for, you know, articles, but I was alternatively afraid of Kiss because they looked like demons, and enjoyed them at the same time.
Yeah, the intended effect.
Yeah, exactly. And then I heard them, and I'm like, this doesn't sound like I thought it would sound.
Well, King Diamond hadn't been invented yet.
No. And then Gene Simmons sued King Diamond for stealing his makeup, which is ridiculous. Come on.
King Diamond was not contemporary to Kiss, was it? Was he?
No, he's Merciful Fate starts in like 79, 80, but really doesn't get big till like 82, 83. And then King Diamond leaves Merciful Fate like around 84, and that's when he really blew up in America.
She looked so cute in her little black dress.
That's the outfit she packed for, like, you know, if there was like a fancy thing to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could see how she packs. I like that everybody dressed up for bed, I guess.
I mean, how long has she been there? They talk about how she's heavier now than she was when she got there.
I guess if you're eating the kind of meal they just ate and you're eating it 3 times a day, maybe like 2 weeks, she could gain 5 or 6 pounds. I don't think she would gain that much weight.
It's so hard to be gone for 2 weeks and nobody comes looking for you. And Regina's timeline here seems to be just like 3 days.
Yeah. As you know, I watch, and I know you do too, a steady diet against our will of true crime. So I always think, like, if this was at 48 hours, like, you know, they'd be looking for them already. But I don't know. I also get the idea that, like, Regina doesn't have anyone in her life. And that's why, like, this whole experience is it why she gets into it. Because, like, I get the feeling that she hasn't had, this is my reading into it. It's not given into the movie, but she hasn't been lucky in love, and she's very shy. And so when this happens, she just kind of goes with it, because this is the Harlequin romance kind of thing she's read about, that she's going to go to this castle and fall in love with a beautiful guy and everything's going to work out, which is a little different for what happens to her.
And they'll be laughing and they'll be kissing.
Yeah. And they'll be fishing together.
There'll be things together have both been missing. Margaret Avery's character is a little bit of a loner too. She's just been wandering the countryside walking, according to her, and somehow lugging these giant books too.
So what's the origin of this movie? Like, how did Bud Townsend and Alan Actor come up with this idea? Like,
I really don't know. I don't know if it was a script first and Bud found it or read it, or if Michael MacReady hired them both to do this. I don't know.
And Bud had success with Nightmare in Wax with Cameron Mitchell before this, so had a little bit of, not like a huge horror name, but he was known for doing horror films.
Both of these movies, Nightmare in Wax and Terror House, are movies that were screened constantly in the 70s. Drive-ins, grindhouses. Nightmare in Wax played on a triple bill with a couple other films for, like, basically the entire 70s. And Terror House was originally released in 72 under the title The Folks at Red Wolf Inn, and then they kept futzing with the title. Like, they would reissue it. They reissued it first as Terror at Red Wolf Inn. And I think that's the title it carried with it when it went to home video. It came back under a various plethora of titles, including Terror House, but also Secrets Beyond the Door.
Yeah.
In 1981.
But 9 years after it debuted. Because I have here that it first played in Madison, Wisconsin in September of 72.
If that's what it says there, that's me that
Yeah.
updated it.
Okay, so that's what I figured, that a lot of these facts come directly from you, so I tend to believe them. They also, when this played overseas, it didn't get to Italy until '74, but it has a great title, A Cena con la Signora Omicidi, which is Dinner with Mrs. Homicide, which gives us a totally different feel, right? It makes it feel very serial killery. In France, it was known as The Inn of Terror. In Mexico, it had two titles, Cena Diabolica, which is Devilish Scene, and The House of the Red Wolf, La Casa del Lobo Rojo. And then it was known as Death at the Red Wolf Inn in Sweden, which that's a spoiler warning. The Folks at Red Wolf Inn is a great title, I think, of the titles for this movie. Secrets Beyond the Door is my favorite because sounds like maybe I'm going to see a Mitchell Brothers movie. But I really like The Folks at Red Wolf Inn because Folks is so homespun, and like certainly no folks are going to get me in trouble. And,
yeah, that title fits the tone of the film a lot better because it's about the older generation exploiting the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've just sort of been seduced into a sense of complacency around these old people, and now they're going to be slaughtered.
And at this time too, I think so many Americans were worried about young folks, like the end of the hippie era and like the Manson, these cults behind every corner. And this is the inverse of that. The monsters are the grandparents versus being the young people rising up with knives against you. Bud Townsend also did Alice in Wonderland
With Christine DeBelle.
who's in one of my favorite movies, A Talking Cat. And he did Coach with Kathy Lee Crosby, The Beach Girls for Crown International, and Love Scenes with one of your favorite actors, Tiffany Bowling, is in that. Monique Gabrielle, Britt Eklund, and Julie Newmar. What a cast! That's like as I say, an all-star cast. To me, that's an all-star cast. And you brought up Alan Actor. He wrote The Dungeon Master, and he was the president of the Columbia School of Broadcasting for a while. I don't know which one. I'm sure there's more than one.
I'm really curious about Herb Ellis, who's listed as an associate producer. This is really his only IMDb credit. And we would be remiss to not mention Nola, whose credit is Girl on the Set.
There's some girl talk here. Is like kind of slumber party.
Yeah.
Girl talky moments.
Regina is attracted to this man that just scared the shit out of her in the kitchen with a giant butcher knife.
I really get the feeling that just from her, it's like no guy has ever really talked to her. Or if they have, she's been too shy to talk to them. So now that she's in this new situation, she's going to like be somebody that she's not. Kind of break out of her shell a little bit.
This could have easily just been a straight up horror movie, but aside from the fact that it's a comedy, it's also a romance. It just gives it sort of a more, it gives it a little more depth. This is one of two sequences that was totally cut from the later version of the film, and I don't know why, because I'm pretty sure they just cut it for time, because when it came out edited, it was known as Terror House, and it was intended to be a co-feature with other movies.
Cameo appearance by the Boom Mic.
Obviously an open mat mistake.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember when It Came From Hollywood came out and they showed all the times Boom Mike showed up in Ed Wood movies. I'm like, well, he was shooting for a totally different aspect ratio than TV. Not that the Boom Mike didn't show up in his movies, but it wasn't always a mistake. This really reminds me, not the cannibalism, but the room. It reminds me of my grandmother's house, who, for some reason, had giant spoons on her wall. I don't know why. Like, they weren't ever used for anything. They're these decorative spoons.
She's already planning the way she's going to cut her up.
I will say that one of the great things about this movie is that there's no bad acting in it. Everybody is like very natural and very good. You know what I mean? For being like, I guess you could, even though made in California, you could see this is it's in very much closer to a regional movie than a mainstream Hollywood film. But everybody's like really solid and very natural in their acting in this.
No, I got enough yesterday. Think I'll stay and read. I'm gonna take a walk. I'll see ya. Oh, goodbye, dear.
What had Linda been in before this? Is this like her first major role, or had she done a few things before this?
No, she'd been in The Magic Garden of Stanley's Sweetheart before this. That was in 1970. Then in 1971, I believe, she made a movie called Why, and she was also offered the role of Tony in Messiah of Evil. Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz hired her to be Tony. Well, then shortly after she got offered that movie, she came on to this project, Terror House, and this was a bigger part, so she decided to go for this. She was roommates with Joy Bang at the time, so she recommended that Joy Bang go and audition for Willard and Gloria.
I love Linda, but I can't see her in Joy Bang's part.
Yeah, it's really kind of hard to imagine anyone other than Joy Bang doing that role, but I would probably feel that way if Linda had done it, you know?
Yeah, it's all we know, but still,
Yeah.
like the iconic scene of Joy, as the theater fills up behind her, it means a lot to me.
Both of those movies mean so much to both of us that, it's hard to imagine anybody else doing these roles. I'm glad Linda took this project instead, because this has so much more for her to do. The sound design for this film is really interesting, like that buzzing fly sound, sort of like doubt starting to nag Regina like an insect.
Mm-hmm.
She's attracted to a thrill.
Yeah.
Because she's excited when Baby John speeds through the town, evading the cops and everything. And you could tell she probably hadn't experienced something like that, like you said. So she's attracted to this sense of danger.
I get the feeling she's read about these things, and we saw her strange dreams of covering her face with food. But she's dreamed of like having this kind of being the central character in this big story, and she's never got to do that, and now this is her opportunity. Unfortunately, is this the best place to be in the center of that kind of story? Maybe not. How many times have you seen this movie?
Wow.
Yeah. Is this a comfort movie to you?
It's one of my biggest comfort films because, well, not only do I love the movie, but the memory of how I first experienced it is important to me. I was about 14 years old. I watched it on WOR's Fright Night time slot, which was, it was on late at night, so I was kind of sleepy, but I saw this movie in the TV guide, Terror House, and I had to see what it was about, and I was just hooked.
The first time I saw it was at my old house. You brought it over and we watched it, and we did a podcast.
That was the first time you watched it?
The first time I saw it, yeah.
I forgot about that. I mean, I remember doing the podcast. I didn't realize that was I've probably seen it maybe like about 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
Between 20 and 30 times, realistically.
All this fresh air makes you hungry.
This lady really feels like my Italian aunt. Because if you went to her house, it was like, you're too skinny. She wasn't trying to fatten me up to eat me. She just really liked making cookies. But I do get an Italian vibe from this.
Good, what is it? Filet, dear.
Filet. How do you put filet on a sandwich like that?
I don't know. I'm going to try it now, though.
It's like on Wonder Bread.
Yeah. If we were to have a Terror House screening and serve people food, they would get a filet sandwich would be part of it, and they would make some kind of like and gummy sharks
On Wonder Bread.
on Wonder Bread. You mentioned Patty Townsend. She worked on a lot of movies I'm fascinated with. The Stephanie Rothman movie Group Marriage, and the Sunderful Girls, and Linda Lovelace for President. She was the script supervisor for all of those movies. Their whole family worked on stuff, though. It's pretty wild.
Jenny Townsend doubled for Linda when she has to swim out to the boat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Linda couldn't swim?
She just probably didn't do it. They may have shot it without her. I don't remember her saying that she didn't want to do it. Now, this scene that's coming up is one of the turning points in the film, which has been pretty laid back up to this point. Dinner scene aside.
Yeah.
This is where you really know you're in a movie where something is terribly wrong.
Should you warn people that are sensitive towards animals?
No.
Okay. All right.
I think if you're watching this, then
Yeah.
you know what's coming.
Yeah, you know it's coming. This is like, is it a cannibal movie? Like, yeah, I mean, a real animal has to be destroyed to be an official cannibal movie. So, yes. This is where it earns its bona fides of being a cannibal film. The first time I watched this with you, and when this moment happened, it blew my mind. Like, I was completely unprepared for this to happen, because you didn't set it up at all.
I didn't spoil it.
I think you just said this beach scene's crazy, just you're going to love it. And I was like, okay. And it was crazier than I thought. I also think you have a weakness for movies where sharks make surprising appearances in ways that you're not ready for sharks. Like My Brother Has Bad Dreams has a
shark finale.
An incredible shark finale.
You didn't know you were in that kind of movie, and
No.
My Brother Has Bad
And
Dreams.
even telling somebody that that's the ending doesn't spoil it. Do you know what I mean? Because you are not ready for what happens at the end. In the same way that you're not ready for this scene. Because this seems like young love, and like, are they going to kiss? Like, what's going to happen? Is he going to tell her a secret?
This is probably a good time to mention that Linda had a very strange approach to making this film. She asked Bud if she could not read the script.
Oh, really?
She never read the script, and she didn't know what was going to happen. And she said, I just want to, you just tell me what I have to say in each scene and I'll say it, but I don't want to read the script. And he was like, fine, if you want to do it like that. So she didn't really know what any of this meant. And she, in a way, you can see how it shaped her performance, because it gives her a sense of innocence and maybe even naivete that she probably wouldn't have if she knew.
I think that's where, as I said before, the naturalistic feel of this, you really get, it feels like like you said, she's experiencing a lot of this for the first time.
That reaction is genuine.
Yeah. I can't even imagine being filmed and this happening and just being like, what? What other movie has a man punch a shark and then say, I think I love you? I mean, that's why you're watching this movie.
Some of the best movies have scenes like that can be read two ways. There's the scene as you experience it for the first time, and then the same scene after you know how the movie's going to turn out. And this is a great example of that, because the first time you see it, you're like, what the fuck? Like, why did he just do that? But later, you start to realize why he did it, because he's a young man now, and he's been living with these crazy people who have been killing people and eating their corpses presumably since he was a child, because he calls them grandma and grandpa. So he's starting to understand that he will never have a woman of his own, because everyone they bring there, they're going to kill. And he loves Regina, and he knows that they're going to do this to her in a day. So he just freaks out a couple of times, and this is him asserting himself over these elderly people.
Well, I think if we take the other women in this, they all feel someone that would be unapproachable to him, versus Regina is like very much a good romantic match for him.
Yes.
Like, she has the same like stunted adolescence that he might have.
She's a little bit goofy.
Yeah.
And like the way she rode that bike down the steps in the
Yeah.
beginning and everything, like she doesn't do things like most people, and he's obviously the same way.
Do you
for
think,
different reasons.
I get, and this is again my reading into it, I get the feeling that he may have had these feelings for someone before, but he's never really gotten that far with them and revealed his feelings to them. It's funny because we're in the middle of a cycle where we've seen one girl go already, The next girl's a day, this is your last day, and then she's just arrived. It's like it's an assembly line in the same way that, like a slaughterhouse has an assembly line. We had a lot of 4-H kids in my high school, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I had this cow that I raised, and I loved him, but one day we had to eat him, and that's just how it is. My mother-in-law told me that story. She had a chicken that was her friend for a long time, and then one day her dad just killed it and they ate it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I realize that that's like a fact of life, and I realize that, the food we get, that it has happened.
Sure, yeah.
But it's like, in today's modern world, we put some distance into that versus like, I guess cannibals don't have the advantage of that distance. They can't go to the grocery store and get their meat. They have to create these kind of situations.
And look what it's done to them.
Yeah.
Like they're these bizarre. Well, you'd have to be bizarre to want to live this life in the first place, but they seem to have carefully crafted this. We assume that you've already watched the film if you're listening to this commentary, but there's a whole conversation where they give a little bit of backstory to Evelyn and Henry. Henry has a military background, and they traveled around together in that way. So this sort of opened them up to new people, and they may have met people that were part of this cannibal association. This conspiracy to this human trafficking ring is really what it is. And
they are what we got warned about in the Satanic Panic.
Yes.
There was this group of people that they probably pass out acid to grade school kids.
But they've got this perfect little ruse going here where they can lure people in. And look at this. I mean, these are 3 human beings that they've done this to in the course of this not even a 90-minute movie. So how many people are they going through? And they have to do something with this meat. They're not eating it all themselves, probably. So they farm it out to like these cannibals. They've
picked the right house because it has a huge freezer that they're, that is perfect for their needs.
She talks about when they bought the house and the size of the freezer, how it's, she acts all innocent. Oh, I'm gonna have to give it a good cleaning.
This time when this came out, I don't want to say a cannibal craze, but it's in the zeitgeist, right? Where you have Texas Chainsaw comes out around this, Warlock Moon, Cannibal Girls, Malatesta's Carnival of Blood. There's a lot of cannibalism happening in movies.
Welcome to Arrow Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Arrow Beach, this and Warlock Moon are practically the same film.
Yeah.
And this does have similarities to Chainsaw. There are a lot of striking similarities. There's a cannibal family. There's a younger member of the family who's a young man, and he's sort of like the crazy executioner type. And there's a moment where the heroine runs into the arms of somebody that she thinks is going to rescue her, and he's one of them. So there's sort of a conspiracy element there, too. The meat locker scene, it's all much more toned down, of course, than Chainsaw.
He has kind of a Keir Dullea look in this scene.
Yeah.
He feels like he's like 14 versus, in his 20s. Almost to the point that they've infantilized him.
Well, they pull his pants down and spank his bare bum later. So, yeah.
Yeah, where they've kind of kept him, this older couple's kept him young so he stays with them. Obviously, because at this point they probably need muscle to, to cut this stuff up and to carry these girls around.
He knows that Regina's special because she might actually be lured into this bizarre lifestyle that they have.
Yeah. It's something they never expected. They just want food, not like either competition or someone to sit at the table with them, so to speak.
We really don't know anything about these people either, or Baby John himself. Like, he could have belonged to one of their victims, and they just kept him. Maybe he was a baby when they got a hold of him and they killed and ate his parents and kept him and raised him as one of their own to be, their stooge, basically. Look, he doesn't want to do it.
The whole Townsend family, like I said, they worked on a ton of stuff. Mike was an electrician on several films. The daughter Jenny worked on The Beach Girls, Evil Speak, Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker, Hell Night as a script supervisor, and The Great Skycopter Rescue with Aldo Ray.
Ooh.
Yes, and the daughter Patricia is in Always with Her Father, which is directed by Henry Jaglom, who she was married to from 79 to 83. And Bud's also in that as an actor. So yeah, the whole family. There's a couple movies like that, and the TV movie The Lathe of Heaven, where multiple Townsends all worked on the same movie together.
It was a family affair, just like the Red Wolf Inn. Linda actually lived with the Townsends at this time while they were making the movies. As I said, she lived with Joy Bang, and that situation was coming to an end, so she was going to have to find another place to live anyway. She said that Bud and Booby, his wife, invited her to move in with them, which was wonderful, and she said it was really nice of them, but then I realized that another reason that they probably offered was because, we were going to start filming soon, and they wanted to make sure they could find me.
I love the trope of chloroform. It's really my favorite.
Yeah, it's bullshit, too.
Yeah. That's an old wrestling finish where they would like, oh, a guy had chloroform, put it on you, you're instantly knocked out. That's how easy it is.
And she's immediately unconscious.
Yeah. Suggestible and unconscious. You can just pick her up and carry her anywhere. I like that they got their butcher smocks ready for this.
It's going to get messy.
Yeah.
There's no explicit gore in this film. According to Linda, Bud did film some gory stuff with body parts hanging in the freezer, but the transfer is so dark that you can't see it. And I think that's the way it is in the original theatrical version. Until we get a nice HD transfer of this, we'll never know, and we may not, because apparently there's no print of the film available. I remember Code Red announced they were going to put it out back in 2013, and of course it never happened.
It's funny because for a movie that played so much in theaters and drive-ins and was released so many times on VHS and DVD, the fact that there isn't like a boutique version of this.
I think the fact that it did play for so long in theaters is probably the reason for that, because the prints were probably so beat up that people just discarded them. It's not like they were making new prints of the movie to ship around. They would just change the title and put it out again.
I really like that closed door where we can kind of hear the hacking and some of the noises and how he lingers on that shot for a while.
Evelyn's starting to lose her acting ability and keeping this a secret from Regina.
Excuse me. I'm not really very hungry this morning.
Linda's kind of one of the roles she did that's still well remembered is the Laverne and Shirley episode she did, correct?
That's true. She played Mrs. Babish's daughter, Amy. And it was only on one episode, but it made a big impression.
Yeah, she said she still has people come up to her and remember that role and say what it meant to them.
Yeah, her character was intellectually disabled, and she did it in a very compassionate, non-stereotypical way. She won an award from the NARC for that performance that she gave, by the way.
Oh, wow.
The character was supposed to come back on Laverne and Shirley because she kind of developed a little romance with Squeaky, or Lenny at the end of it. The character, not Linda.
Yeah.
The producers decided against bringing back Amy Babish, but Linda was on Laverne and Shirley one more time. And she's wearing a wig, so it's really hard to tell it's her. Remember what I said earlier about how she is sometimes unrecognizable. Regina called her mother, so she has a relationship with her mother.
Yeah. I like to think, too, of this playing drive-ins, that there were people conceived to this movie without ever knowing. Like, my parents, like, oh, we were in Mexico and, on our honeymoon, and that's when you were conceived. Like, oh, that's very romantic. Like, You were conceived during an Andy Milligan movie.
That's the conception that I would choose.
I would
could.
like to think that I was conceived after my parents saw Bird with a Crystal Plumage and hated it. That's like my dream, right? They came home. They're like, boy, I can't believe how bad that movie was. And then they realized how much they loved each other and like, let's make young Sam, who will one day grow up to be obsessed with Dario Argento and everything we hate.
The kids never ever turn out the way you think they will, and they're never exactly like you.
Manson said your kids will come at you with Giallo, and that's what happened with me. The other night I said that to my mom was at the house, and I had the Argento Fear book out. She's like, who's this? I'm like, oh, he's the director of Bird with a Crystal Plumage. She's like, that fucking movie. I hate it. I'm like, oh, okay.
I love that she hates it.
I mean, she outright hates it. Like, she's like, I don't understand it. That bird makes a weird noise. There's no such bird. Like, that's the part that she does. Like, there's no real bird like that. I always like the moment in these kind of movies where you think that the law is going to help them and they're just part of the conspiracy. You know, which happens in the later Chainsaw movies. And, you know, that this whole town is kind of... The idea I get is, like, everybody around them knows their secret and has been brought into it.
Because we don't really have a sense of how rural this area is where this mansion is supposed to be.
Yeah, once you're in this house, this is... The world of this movie is all inside these gates. They're very dressy.
They know how to live.
Yeah.
I hate the eating scenes.
Oh. I prefer to eat alone. Like, as I've gotten older, my ability to eat around other human beings has diminished to it. Maybe through the pandemic where I didn't have to eat with that many people, you know?
I hate when people breathe while they're eating.
That's why I was thinking, like, all my other worries about eating, like, wow, what a commentary track. Tell us about your eating issues.
That's a beautiful shot with them driving and the trees reflected off the windshield. I like that a lot.
Well, there's like a lot of... That's what's funny is like there's a lot of beauty around this house. There's that beach, there's those trees, and meanwhile inside the house is this world of horror.
Or a world of terror. A house of terror. Terror house.
Or for them, it's heaven, I guess. It's a best case situation for a cannibal.
It's also not healthy to be a cannibal. There's a disease called kuru that you can succumb to. So maybe that's what's wrong with all these people. Their brains are degenerating because of kuru.
Did you ever hear the Anton LaVey cannibal story?
No.
He claimed that, you know, when he was the San Francisco police photographer, a thing that probably never happened, that someone had died, someone had lost their leg to cancer. The part that was not cancerous, he was allowed by the police to take it and cook it, and he served it to one of his classes, like his paranormal classes, and they all got to experience cannibalism. None of this story, I believe, is true. Like,
No.
at no point I'm like, I remember reading it when I was younger. I'm like, this is a great story. None of it's true. The cops are like, oh yes, Dr. LaVey, not even a doctor. Please take this leg and serve it to your friends in your Black Lodge with Togar the cat.
The crucial freezer scene.
Oh yes. I wish I had a freezer like this in my house. Not because I want to have people, but it's always with my wife, like, you can't have 10 boxes of popsicles because there's never...
Yeah.
I would have all the popsicles. I would not have people. There'd be push-up popsicle.
Of course there wouldn't be people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
wink, wink.
one, yeah, exactly. One hopes.
It reminds me of the freezer in Blood and Lace.
Oh,
also.
yeah.
Oh, here we go.
People had these, like, kind of ice houses, yeah, you know, in the old time. Oh. Do you like that, like, a Hugo horn that's kind of playing there?
Yeah. I think that other movie, Welcome to Arrow Beach, has an Ugo horn when there's a body part swinging.
Bill Marks, who did some of the music for this, did all 3 Yorga movies. Well, we can consider Death Master a Yorga movie. Scream, Blackula Scream, and The Astral Factor. But I never really think outside of the 2 songs in this of like a ton of music in this.
It's more of a soundscape, which is another connection that it has to Chainsaw.
Start swimming.
Why is that boat floating around out there?
If you get in that boat, do you know where it takes you? Point Doom.
Mariana's in the boat.
Yeah, it's right down 2 or 3 beaches over. There's this town with this dark visitor, and you might want to come check it out.
They practice cannibalism there, too. The Smiths would fit right in.
You know, the other thing there, that a lot of times in 70s movies, when we get the reveal of the body parts, maybe I'm thinking of Italian movies, but when we get the reveal of like heads and arms and stuff, it always looks super fake and takes me out of the movie. And that scene, I think because of how it's cropped and how dark it is and the hand swinging, none of that scene makes me think that that stuff's fake. Like, it's really well done for the body parts.
It's of the less is more variety. Instead of gory, which is a lucky thing if he did want to put gore in it and ended up not using it. I like it better this way.
Mm-hmm. At first I was getting Friday the 13th vibes. Now I have Day of the Woman vibes.
Day of the Woman. I love how you call it that.
I always like to use the alternate titles to make you happy.
Oh, you know me so well.
Yes. Isn't it sad that that's the name I think of that movie versus the real name? Obviously, I Spit on Your Grave, which is a much better title, but, you know.
Nobody would have gone to see a movie called Day of the Woman.
Or they would have gone to see it back. This seems like a movie that is going to really the triumph of women. And,
right.
And like,
it's a
I guess
feminist picture.
Technically that's true, but it is a long way around the barn to get there.
Whether it was intended that way or not, that is definitely not how people saw I Spit on Your Grave.
No, not at all. And Camille Keaton, really the unluckiest actress. She's Solange, and then she's and I Spit on Your Grave. Like, you know.
It's like when, people say they read dirty magazines for the good article.
Oh.
Like that What If I'm Gay after school special. They find a gay magazine in his bedroom. He's like, there's a really good weightlifting article in there. That's like saying you're into I Spit on Your Grave for the feminist aspect of it.
Yeah. I do like when people write these, like, I'm guilty of this too, so I'm probably speaking to myself as the choir, like, these, like, reimaginings of these movies and find the psychological angle within it, that it is a very pro-woman movie. No, it's not.
I don't know how you would get that, but
yeah. It's like,
didn't write it.
To get to the empowerment, we must endure a lot.
She's so unlucky.
Yeah.
She might have gotten away if it wasn't for that train.
Very town that dreaded sundown, where the train totally cuts everybody off from the Phantom Killer. I always think about that scene where they're just like shooting between the trains to try to get him.
I'll talk about bad luck.
Yeah. You are right about this network. Everybody in this town knows everybody, and of all the vehicles that catch you, you know.
You ought to be ashamed. Both students have been put on probation and will have no privileges for a month.
I'm always amazed whenever you find somebody that worked on a movie like this and see that they did kid movies after. Rich Harrison, who's one of the editors, eventually worked on, or sound. He did sound for this, but he became an editor of cartoons. He did Darkwing Duck, Goof Troop, a lot of the Disney TV shows, but he has 111 sound effect credits, including Idaho Transfer, a movie that I'm sure we'll probably do a commentary on someday and wonder what to talk about during it. And Invitation to Hell and All the Kind Strangers. So he's got some pretty cool credits.
This is another cut scene that was not in the PG-rated version called Terror House. This did have a little extra gore.
The thing that you can say is this is a positive movie because this couple has shared interests and they've been together for an extended time.
Relationship goals.
Yeah, relationship goals. And she made him ladyfingers. Literally ladyfingers.
She's thoughtful.
Linda did a cookbook with you, right, for this?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember I did one of the illustrations of it.
She did the cookbook. I didn't
Yeah.
have anything to do with it.
You printed it, though, didn't you?
No.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay.
This would have been one of the scenes that was filmed in Maury Mansion in Redlands, California. And the owners of Maury Mansion, when they agreed for the production to come in and film there, they were going to get paid for it. Well, they only ended up coming in and shooting for a couple of days there, and I think they had booked the place for 10 or more days, so they thought they were getting a lot more money than they did. They were really burned. This is a great aspect of the film right here, this moment where Regina has to make a choice, because, you know, Baby John's been basically begging the two old people to keep her and to let her live there as his mate, and here we get the sense that they're considering it. So she has this test. Is she going to be able to eat the meat, or isn't she, now that she knows it's human flesh? And of course she can't.
Is love strong enough to get you to eat human meat?
Right, yeah.
I always bring it up, but this would be one of those Love Is cartoons with those little fat cherubs from the 70s. Love is eating human flesh for the one that you love.
This whole scene has a very unnerving sound design, too, with that weird reverb that they put on it. There's so many little subtle touches to this movie. That's one of the reasons I love it so much.
I made it all special. It's a special recipe Aunt Flora taught me. You will just
I really like about this scene, too, is that when she first got to the house, she was super happy about all the food. But at this point, she's already eaten human flesh, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you've already committed that worst sin that there is. Like, and if you really love this guy, I guess lean in. But now they're not even hiding it. I mean, he's just straight up eating fingers.
Did he? I didn't see it.
That's when in the scene before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But they've also really pushed how disgusting it is to eat food. That's when you know you're old, when you've reached to the point where you just put a napkin in your shirt. I haven't yet reached that point yet. My mother-in-law has no problems with that. Like, we'll be at a restaurant, and she'll just start wrapping herself in napkins so she doesn't get food on her.
Look what a huge piece of meat she took.
Oh, man. Who is that, do you think, of the...
It's got to be Margaret Avery.
Yeah.
It's got to be part of her ass. It's a rump roast.
That's the other interesting thing about this movie is it doesn't get like Herschel Gordon Lewis goofy, like, you know, them naming recipes. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't get into that Mad Magazine-y kind of thing. That's what another thing I like about it. It's as subtle as a cannibal movie can be. The other thing about this cannibal clan is they're much cleaner than any other cannibals in movies. Like the Sawyer family in Chainsaw is the most disgusting.
Yeah.
Like they're just horrific. And like these guys at least they keep a really clean house. They have beautiful furniture.
An impossibly clean house.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, she failed the test.
He's like, I have to floss. I have a human leg between my teeth right now.
The Sawyers also were 3 guys living together. There was no woman there who might have actually cared about the condition of the house, as opposed to this place, Evelyn's there, so she's going to make sure it's clean. Richard Dreyfuss auditioned for the role of Baby John, as did David Soul. And Linda said that when David Soul did his audition, he kept asking to do it again. He's like, I know I can do it better. Let me do it another time. But Linda picked John Nielson out of a bunch of headshots, and she thought he had the right look for Baby John, so she recommended him, and he ended up getting the part. His world is crashing down around him.
I also like that her love of, well, love, but her attraction to him is she sees him from the outside without him talking, without knowing anything. And he feels like that kind of fairy tale prince, right? But like the truth has never been worse. Like
Yeah.
he's like
Wow.
literally like a human baby. What have you done with my baby?
What are you going to do to my baby?
He gets so upset lately over nothing at all.
That's a great line.
We've got to get out of here.
We?
We haven't got much time. I won't let anything happen.
She's already snuck out of the house once. I mean, you have to do it again.
I'm surprised nobody else has escaped, and news of this human trafficking scheme isn't everywhere. Like Barbara Walters isn't doing a special on it.
I'd like to remake this as an episode of Cold Case Files or 48 Hours, where it was all like interviews of people and families, kind of recut it and did it in that way. But then I'd hate it if I saw somebody remade it like that.
We might have already mentioned this. I think you mentioned how there's a fairy tale aspect of this where she's going to live with her prince in a beautiful castle, but that really is what makes this film special, because a lot of movies about cannibalism, you know, they go for the gory aspect of it, or there's just a very downbeat sort of atmosphere. And this does have a downbeat atmosphere a little, but there's always a sense of hope going on here that she might get out of this, and of course she does. So that's interesting.
Did you ever eat pig's feet?
Never.
My grandfather used to keep a whole fridge full of it in jars just like that, and it horrified me as a kid because they still have like the nails on them. Going back to what we talked about before, of like the cleanness of the way that we're used to eating meat, and like seeing like food, like he ate like ham hocks and cow tongues and stuff like that because he grew up in the Depression, so he'd eat anything, and it was always so upsetting to see pig's feet just floating in there.
You're being a bad boy again.
Well, Henry and Evelyn are from that era.
Yeah, don't let anything go to waste. And then the
Bring that girl out here at once.
Baby John Smith.
they really worked hard to name him.
You're being a bad boy. Get the belt.
His inner child really comes out here.
Mind your grandma and get the belt.
The parents that do the get the weapon of your destruction for me always struck me as like it's not really discipline. It's almost like there's a fine line between discipline and sadism.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, well, I guess maybe he isn't my dream. Maybe this isn't the fantasy that I had when I moved out here, watching a grown man get spanked in front of me.
They can use this later
Yeah.
in their sex life.
Yeah. I also like that he looked at her and just giggled, like he's like almost in on the joke of them.
Lovely day for night shot there.
I have Becca trained now that when day for night happens in a movie, she yells it out. My favorite is when something's too dark, she yells, night for night.
This dog was reportedly very sweet, and the trainer put a thing in its mouth to make its teeth show and spread some kind of cooking fat on her neck to make the dog go after it. But the death of the dog is one of the more shocking moments in the film, I think, and it's another moment where Baby John just goes completely nutso, which you see what he's really capable of. The dog scene, though, obviously was simulated, and the shark scene was totally real, which makes it all the more disturbing. Grandma forgives you.
I think it's movies like this that made me really weirded out about going to someone's house. Like when I was dating them. Do you like see them around their family?
It can be a turning point in the relationship.
Yeah. One of my ex-girlfriends, I went to her family's house for like 3 days. And I had to rend a pig when I was there. They had like a pig roast and nobody else would help her mother like cut the meat up. And I volunteered because I was, new boyfriend. And not anything I ever want to do again. They weren't eating people though. It wasn't a long pig. It was literally a pig.
No lingering shot of the dead dog.
No.
Probably because it was still breathing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I always forget how he's so obsessed with his plants.
It only happens in the beginning and then later at the end. It's not like brought up throughout.
But he talks to them. And he has this inverse sort of sense of propriety. Like he values the lives of plants more than he does living human beings.
And she does the dog too, it seems. I like that it's her fault that the dog got killed.
It's like a Garden of Eden moment here. Poor Regina. She's like, what am I going to do? Should I make a run for it?
Well, also, if you go by, like you said, that she didn't have a script, she's living this as it would really happen.
This is very similar to the ending of Frightmare.
Mm-hmm. Another 70s cannibal movie.
That came after this one.
Mm-hmm.
That was the last thing that Linda did for the film, and she recorded the screaming.
Oh, wow.
It was in December of 1971. They went into a recording studio, and Bud was there, like, coaching her on how he wanted her to scream. And he's like, do it like you've just been punched in the stomach. She does that thing at the end.
I like that cut of the inside of his mouth, how this is starting to get these, like, jump cuts.
What could this have looked like in 1981 when it was reissued as Secrets Beyond the Door? That was playing in Cineplexes. It wasn't the second or third bill on a drive-in program somewhere. And plus, it was also reissued as Terror House in 81 because that's when it was on Siskel and Ebert sneak previews as a Dog of the Week.
In 81, there was, God, how many slashers came out? This movie makes you feel like you're going to see those kind of slasher scenes. Especially if, if that's all you know. Do you know what I mean? You've been, like, inured to the slasher genre, and suddenly you're like, well, certainly we're going to see a scene where somebody gets chopped up, and it never really happens. At the time when it came out, the mix of horror and humor outside of, like, Abbott and Costello movies, there hadn't been a movie that... This movie has definitely varying tones throughout the film. There's moments where it is quite horrifying, and there's moments where it's ridiculous. And I think that some people may see it and be like, yeah, I just want it to be one thing. I want it to be like Texas Chainsaw, or I want it to be humorous. And it varies so much. I wonder if that kind of holds some people back from liking it.
And she made brownies for Baby John.
It's funny where he had this, like, opportunity to leave, and now he's, like, re-infantilized.
He's also really into that flower, just like Arthur Space would have been.
Like, she's kind of taken on the role of the grandmother for him versus, like, a wife.
And they lived happily ever after, and it started all over again.
Well, thanks for joining us for the folks at Red Wolf Inn. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you maybe built up some appetite or lost your appetite or whatever it is. I'm Sam from BNS About Movies.
I'm Bill Van Ryn from Fanzine Drive-In Asylum. Thanks for watching one of our favorite films with us, or at least listening to us talk about it. We appreciate it.
I love the way the credits like break out into like the courses of a meal.
Side dishes.
Yeah. You're the side dish in the movie.
Oh, you're the main course.
Wow, a little wink at the end too.